Hello, and welcome to the Demiplane of Gaming. I am, of course, your host, Stephen D. Russell. I am here, of course, with my co-host, Owen Casey Stevens.
Hi, folks.
And we are here today just to hang out and talk a little bit about everything. Maybe we'll do a little Gen Con talk. Maybe we'll do a little talk about Kickstarters and talk a little bit about our products and the rough life of being a freelance publisher. So
Yeah. You're lucky to just have to manage being a publisher.
I know. That's all I have to manage is being a publisher. Fortunately, we're doing well with that, so I can't complain. So this week we released. The first thing I can mention is that we're getting ready to do our first product for 13th Age. Rob Heinsoe and Jonathan Tweet's vision of fantasy role playing. I guess
Who wrote that for you?
What's that?
Who wrote that for you?
Technically, I wrote it because it's a conversion of 101 not so simple monster templates.
Okay.
Who did the conversion is a guy named Patrick, and I'm not even going to try to say his last name on the air with right now, but he's a guy from Poland, and his name on the Paizo forums is a guy named Rumir, and he did a tremendously good job of doing the conversion. Rob, actually, I just got an email from him, and he complimented him on some of the ideas of where he went that even Rob was afraid to do, but thought that the level adjustments really adjusted for it. So it was really interesting feedback. It's the first time I've gotten from a licensor that kind of direct feedback when they're looking at a project, because it's interesting because there's not a lot of third-party support for 13th Age right now.
Yeah.
As I look through it, it's small compared to Pathfinder's third-party support, or Fate's third-party support, or even Dungeon World's third-party level support. So it was interesting. I felt like I was getting more, but even when I was doing stuff for Monty Cook's Arcana Evolved, I never got that kind of direct feedback on a project. So it was really rather interesting. I found that really refreshing and nice, and they even complimented us on the fact that we kept everything so open on our content. Which that was already given because we'd done it for Pathfinder. If it's game mechanics, I want everybody to be able to use it. I want everybody to be able to play with it, and I think templates really help with that, especially if somebody can bring it into their adventure to make their monsters cooler. Because even though 13th Age now has like 200 monsters to work with, you can still feel slightly limited in certain situations when you're trying to come up with the right thing. And I think 101 templates can really help out. And what I like about it is you don't have something like Advanced Bestiary or my own book of monster templates crossing over with any of these, because that was one of my big things when I wrote it originally. Everybody knows I'm a huge fan of the Advanced Bestiary. I was thrilled to get a chance to write for its Pathfinder version, and I never ever wanted to co-opt any of the monsters out of there. I wanted to be inspired by them, not unused, I guess is the best way to say. I didn't want to reuse anything, even though I could have. It was just, and plus the idea was to create some really simple monster templates that could be done really fast. And my original idea was, hey, let's do 101 simple monster templates. Well, I really couldn't come up with 101 simple ideas because, like I said, the idea was, so it became not so simple. I tried to come up with slightly more ideas than were traditional, and some of them got really complex over the course of it. But the majority of them are pretty simple and fast that you can apply on the fly. So some of them are more.
And the other thing about using something like Advanced Bestiary, which is open content, right? People are free to do that. But is that you then have to wonder what happens if Green Ronin decides to do the Advanced Bestiary for some of their game system, right? So the people at Paizo were using the Green Ronin templates from the original 3.5 Advanced Bestiary for a lot of Pathfinder stuff, and they just did the conversions themselves. And through 3 bestiaries, they never actually printed the template. And then just as Green Ronin was deciding that, yes, we are going to go ahead and update Advanced Bestiary to Pathfinder, Bestiary 4 comes out, and it has, like 5 templates in it from there. So when Advanced Bestiary came along, the decision had to be made. So the developer had to make it.
Were those specific to Bestiary 4, or were they ever part of any of the Adventure Pass? Because I know sometimes they take monsters from the Adventure Pass and they put them in.
It was stuff that they'd used before.
Yeah, I figured, because usually what they do is they'll take the art that they commissioned for, and that's a lot of times what determines what ends up being in the bestiary. So I was kind of wondering if that's what happened, or they just decided that they really liked those so much that they had to be in the bestiary.
Yeah, I can, having seen more of the internal process, I can safely say at Paizo that whether or not we have art for something is a consideration.
Yeah.
But
not like it was in the early days, though. Yeah.
But it's only one consideration, right?
Yeah.
Paizo, if Paizo wants to do it, it's one of the things that sometimes happens. They say, hey, we've got this cool thing and we have art for it, but we don't really like that art that much, so we want to do new art of that.
Yes. Now we have more money and better artists. So yes, let's recommission that.
Well, or sometimes it's not even those things, right? Sometimes it's, hey, we've we put that out early and now we thought we want to put a different emphasis on how that monster works, right? Yeah. Or all sorts of other possibilities. But in any case, so we ended up deciding, since A, all of those things are already done in Bestiary 4, and B, Bestiary 4 is going to be, in fact, at this point it already is, available free on the Pathfinder resource document on the Paizo website, that we don't want to put those in Advanced Bestiary. So we replace them with new things that we put together, which is why people like you had an opportunity to go ahead and put something in there, because we wanted to expand it. But yeah, so I generally prefer, when I'm doing a compilation product, I may be inspired by other things, but I very, very rarely actually just grab things whole cloth, or even largely rewrite them. Right? It's just
I mean, one of the things that I really like about compilation products is that you get a chance to work with it again and correct some of the things that you weren't. Nothing's ever perfect because it has to be done. But
right.
It's a wonderful chance to get to go and just touch on some things that have been highlighted in your chance of using it. And to say something about the Advanced Bestiary, Matthew Cernet's idea of just doing an entire book of templates was pretty revolutionary at the time. I think only one other company had done anything close to it, and it was a relatively small and unknown company at the time. And I just thought it was really brilliant, and I wasn't even aware of that product until I had heard of Advanced Bestiary when it came out, and its templates were still the best that anybody had done. Even that book that was before them, this was better. I think the only complaint I ever heard from anybody about Advanced Bestiary is there was a lot of dread. The word dread was used a lot, but
yes.
it made perfect sense because it created a format and type for what you were doing with it. So even though it seemed like a lot of it, and it made it really easy to reference the undead really quickly.
Right. Well, it does, but also we wanted to distinguish. There's sort of a good rule that one should attempt to have things be the same or different, right? So if we're going to have a ghoul template that produces a ghoul-like creature, but you can have a ghoul camel if you're so inclined.
Yes.
Then we want to put a different name on it.
Yeah. It was interesting in that fact that I really enjoyed it, and it was really interesting to see one of the very first things I did after when I got the new one was skim through to see what the new templates were, so that I could hey, what'd they do? So.
Yeah, well, and it was fascinating when I was telling people to send me pitches because the Advanced Bestiary covered a lot of territory, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing in there about having someone be fused to a throne, as a random example, right?
Yeah.
So when I got pitched that, or Clinton Boomer pitched the Ufuda, which is basically a template that gives you a origami version of a monster that's actually weaker than the original.
Yeah.
Which is just a cool and fascinating idea that I could have gone through a whole bunch of lists of things we could do without coming up with that. So it was fun to see where else things went. So we were going to have Sean K. Reynolds on tonight.
Yes, that was the original plan. We were going to talk about his new Kickstarter, which is called, it's escaping me right now.
5 Moons.
5 Moons, that's right.
And we were having a kind of connection problem with him, and it appears to have fixed itself. So here in a few minutes, we might be able to go ahead and get Sean on.
Did you copy and send him the link already?
No, not yet.
Okay, I'll copy and send it to him just to make sure that if he wants to get on, he can get on.
We're ironing out the last issues that need to be done before he gets online, and then we'll join him on your regularly scheduled Demiplane already in progress. So I'll be very interested to see how your 13th Age book goes.
I'm really interested to see how it sells. I've had some I've had some contact with some people who have been rather interesting about what they're planning to do with that, and asking some very pointed questions about how the mechanics of it will work, which is not my thing. I am not I like 13th Age. I looked at I got the book. I looked through it. I enjoyed the artwork. I thought it was a very interesting book. I was really upset that it came out the same year that I was working on Lords of Gossamer and Shadow. Get noticed when you're going up against Monty and 13th Age and Fate Core and all this kind of stuff. But that's a publisher's life. But I was real impressed by it, and I thought it was really neat. And I thought their approach, if you tried to do this 15, 20 years ago, I think it would have failed utterly, because people would have just called it the Fantasy Heartbreaker, your version of D&D, but kind of a deal. And I think Kickstarter has really kind of destroyed that notion, especially when you get people on a professional level like Rob and Jonathan, and it had some really nice, interesting approaches that I was happy with.
Well, and there have been other games that started with D20 and went a different direction, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, although very few people know it, one of the very earliest was the EverQuest tabletop role-playing game, which
it was. I thought it was the mana system that you had to deal with on there was brilliant. I thought you did some amazing work on that.
And then not long after that, Monty Cook did Arcana Unearthed, which later became Arcana Evolved.
I know nothing about that.
Yeah, nothing whatsoever. Just and even ignoring things like one-shots like Dark Company, for example, from Green Ronin, Black Company, sorry.
Black Company, yes, Black Company.
Which that was one of my dream projects, so I can't believe I just got the name wrong. Even ignoring that, there were things like Gamma World that came out of Sword and Sorcery, and some Masterminds originally started with the D20 rules, and even in the first edition, it had very much become its own thing. But by now, it's you can see the DNA in there, but it's a very, very, very different creature.
Hi, Sean.
Hello.
How are you?
Good. How are you guys?
Good. So we're already in progress. So you don't get a lot of lead-in time here.
That's fine.
So everyone, this is Sean K. Reynolds. He is a world-renowned RPG game designer that has been involved in a whole lot of things. You might have heard of a few of them. They're little underground games like Dungeons and Dragons and Pathfinder and other stuff too. And Sean and I very briefly worked for WotC together, although I left and he stayed there for a long time. He eventually hopped over to Paizo, and then he left mere weeks before I managed to enter the building. So his escape
all part of the plan.
Yeah. But he is now working on his own RPG, and he's drawing on, like 20 years of experience?
Something like that, yeah.
And has been involved in a lot of design and redesign. He was around for the design of 3rd edition. He was very heavily involved in creating the Beginner Box, which I think is one of the best beginning RPGs. The Pathfinder Beginner's Box, which I think is one of the best beginner RPGs currently on the market. And he's working on the Five Moons RPG right now, which is going to, I think, as we were just discussing, you'll be able to see a lot of the DNA of previous games in there, but it is going to be its own thing. Sean, do you want to give us the elevator pitch for Five Moons?
Well, as far as the game itself goes, I've been working on various iterations of D&D, including Pathfinder, for the past 14 to 16 years, and uh, it's nice to have a really complicated game that has a lot of fiddly bits, but when you get to the point where it is now, you have so many bits that fit together in weird ways, it causes a lot of rules exceptions, and I just kind of wanted to start over and create a game that is easier to play, easier to learn, and easier to read, that doesn't have like so many thousands of interlocking pieces, and just kind of like toning down the complexity just a bit and creating more of a beginner box like experience so that people who are just getting into RPGs or want a much lower, not so much of a high maintenance experience for playing, can get into this game.
Is this going to officially be released under the OGL, or are you going so far back to basics that you're not going to use the license?
I'm thinking right now it's not going to be released under the OGL. It's different enough that it would probably just be kind of weird with people looking at it and trying to make it fit in with standard D20 stuff. On one hand, I do want it to be compatible enough with like D&D 3rd Edition and Pathfinder that people could easily convert a character, but I don't want it just to be a... I don't want people to think they can just plug and play and just run with it, and that might cause some weirdness. So we're going to take it easy. We're looking over our options for licensing, and we'll probably end up doing something kind of between Paizo's use of the OGL, which is you have to abide by certain standards, but there's no licensing, versus the options that Monty Cook is using for the Numenera license, which is there's a small fee, but there's no restrictions on content. Somewhere in the middle ground, not sure where yet.
But you're rewriting all the rules from scratch, right?
Yes.
Everything is, even if it's informed from 15 years of D20, it's stuff that you're coming up with. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you on, Steve. Yeah.
That's okay. That's okay. Having worked with Monty's license under Arcana Evolved and the new one that they developed for Numenera, which had a lot of similarities to it, there was a lot of frustration with the new Numenera one because it had a cap for renegotiation of the free license.
Sure.
I think it's like a certain. Is it now a dollar amount? As I remember, and there was the dollar amount wasn't defined. It was a little odd. So I'm interested to see that.
When you say it wasn't defined, there was a set dollar amount, but it didn't say whether it was gross retail or.
Yeah, it was. It was, and you could tell it was one of those things where we need to get our license out, and we've got, I think they were still a little blown away with how successful Numenera was at the time, and how many people wanted to be part of the license. So it's one of those things that when I looked at it, I said, well, I'm glad I'm not in a position that I have to have this license, because I really wanted it, because we had one or two people who were really interested in it, but we ended up passing just because it had some frustrations to it. Like I said, I never want to knock. Somebody gives somebody an opportunity to do something for free. You don't get to talk smack about it. But
for me, on one hand, I want to have a setup that requires a minimal amount of hassle for me. Like, I've had to deal with situations where it's like, oh, I have to write a $1.50 royalty check this month. That's really annoying. But on the other hand, I don't want someone to say, hey, here's the guide to killing babies, and it's for the Five Moons RPG.
Yeah.
So I want to split the difference and find a nice spot in the middle there.
Yeah, and that's always the struggle, I think for people is to make sure.
You have to look up.
So Five Moons, you just
have to
did
look
a
out that
Kickstarter.
someone doesn't decide to do. Steve, you go.
Okay. All right. So you're doing Five Moons now, and you're just about wrapped up, because I know I'm a backer on this one. You're just about ready to wrap up the book
Actually,
of
we're
White
only
Magic,
halfway
correct?
through. We're only halfway
Okay.
through the campaign. We have 19 days left.
Okay. I just
So
meant
still
you're about ready to wrap up your second one as far as delivering. Your first.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. The text for the Goody White Kickstarter, which wrapped up right before Gen Con, that's in the hands of the graphic designer for layout. I just mailed off the miniature to Shannon Stilts, who is going to be making the mold and casting all of those. And once I have the book in PDF format, I'm going to send that out to the backers and give them a couple weeks just to catch any last-minute typos, and then it'll go over to the printer to get printed, and we should have that ready in time for Christmas.
Yeah, that's a really great way to do that of all the Kickstarters I've seen. I always like when the PDF comes out first, and it gives your backers time to assist you in making the product better.
Yeah,
and I've always found anytime we've done it, they've always caught something that would have been catastrophically stupid had we let it go out.
Yeah, there's no way for any company, no matter how big, to put as many eyeballs on a book as even a few hundred backers can pretty quickly.
Yeah, it always helps.
Yeah.
So, Sean, are you expecting? I mean, obviously, 5 Moon is funding and going forward, and you're going to hit some stretch goals. Are you thinking that this is something you are going to be doing a lot of support for going forward?
Yes, I have 9 or 10 products planned for the year between the official launch, which is Gen Con of next year, and the year after that, Gen Con 2016. We've got about 9 products, including the core book, 3 adventures, a couple of world-specific books for the associated game setting that you don't have to use if you want to just play the game in your own campaign world. So yeah, a lot of stuff to be keeping me busy. A monster book. I already have a couple of freelancers lined up for the first 2 adventures, and someone to work on the monster book with me. Talking to a pretty well-known fantasy fiction author who's worked on the Forgotten Realms to possibly do at least a short story or a novella for the setting. So yeah, got a lot of stuff planned. It's not just a one-off, and I'm keep doing this.
And you say you don't have to use the campaign setting world, but some of that world's metaphysical assumptions are represented in the rules, right? Like you did an interesting piece about undead and how undead start in this one very simple skeletal form, and because they are lacking essential bits, they are driven to somehow find the right kind of living stuff to feed on, and as they do that, they can evolve to more and more solid and more, I guess, cogent undead.
Yes, well, just in the same way that Gary Gygax used Greyhawk as the basis for the AD&D world, and Wizards did a similar thing with 3rd edition. You know, Greyhawk was nominally the official setting for 3rd edition, and stuff was technically placed there. I'm going to be doing the same thing for 5 Moons, the RPG, although you won't necessarily need the setting-specific source books to play the campaign. You could, use 5 Moons to run a Greyhawk game, Forgotten Realms game, Dark Sun game. There's talk about wanting to reskin it as a more horror sort of themed game, or even like a light sci-fi game. But obviously, there are concepts that I want to do in the setting that are driving some design decisions about things that will go in the core book, like the idea of undead evolving, the idea of being able to retrain your character more easily than you can in like D&D or Pathfinder. So that sort of stuff is just becoming a default rule in the core rulebook, so that I don't have to go and write it in as a separate additional rule for the campaign setting book.
Interesting.
Do you think your core design of 5 Moons will lead to a game that will creak less after, say, a decade of expansion books?
That's really hard to say. It depends on what sort of products you make in that 10-year period. Like if the focus is, maybe 32 pages of additional rules every year, and then a whole bunch of adventures or supplemental rule stuff like magic items that don't really fundamentally alter how you're building your character, then yeah, that gives the game a lot more longevity. But if the idea is you're going to put out 128 or 300, 400 pages of additional rules material every year, like they do for D&D or for Pathfinder or a bunch of other games, you're going to gather a weight of game design dust on all of your gears, and you're going to need to clean that off a little earlier rather than later. Having been part of 3 game companies that have been in that cycle of producing a lot of rules material, I kind of want to keep it light, just because I'm enjoying the kind of pristine ground of having a lot of game space to explore in without having to worry about the consequences of Splat Book A plus Splat Book C plus Splat Book D, creating some sort of weird hyper combination that the original designer never thought of.
So you mentioned that you've been in the three game companies that have had to deal with this kind of question. That sort of leads into a couple of the classic questions I normally ask people. And in fact, Mike Myler, last time we did a Demiplane, escaped without me asking these questions. So let me open with this one. How'd you get into role-playing games? Just playing them and being interested in them at all?
My cousin David got me into. We played AD&D First Edition, and actually no, we played the basic D&D version, and then switched to AD&D, and we also played some Star Frontiers. And so I remember, like, his house and my house were within, like, right at distance of each other, so we would spend, that one summer, about every other day, one of us would ride to each other's house, and we'd game for about 4 or 5 hours, and then go to our respective homes. So yeah, it's all because of my cousin David.
And how did you make the hop from someone who played a lot to someone who was involved professionally?
Well, after college, I was working for a daughter company of Time Warner on one of their small video game companies, and I was heavily involved in the unofficial AD&D mailing list, and I got into a lot of arguments with the guy in charge of TSR's online policy, who, unfortunately for him, he was more of an engineer sort of guy and not really a public relations sort of guy, and so there were a lot of issues with TSR's online policy at the time. And when he finally convinced the management to create a full-time position so that he could get back to his normal job at TSR and not take on all this additional internet stuff, I applied and got the job and became TSR guy. He quit my second day, and so then I was reporting directly to Jim Ward. And if you're not familiar with some of the classic TSR staff, Jim Ward is he's one of the legacy people of TSR. If you spell his name backwards, it's Drawmidge. Jim Ward is that Drawmidge, as in Drawmidge's instant summons, that sort of thing. That's how far back Jim Ward goes. So I was reporting directly to him and working on the TSR AOL site and their website. And over the next 2 years, at the twilight hours of TSR, I got to know the people in the creative services department, and they're the ones who designed and edited the D&D games. And they told me that they had some freelance available, so I just started doing some freelance, and that went off well. And when Wizards did the buyout, they brought me over as part of the web team, and then I realized that my position on the web team was kind of redundant because they already had a webmaster, and my fight at TSR was to actually get a full website, and now that Wizards of the Coast had a website, that meant that job was done. So I applied for a game design job that was opening up soon, and I got it, and I joined Team Greyhawk.
I have always loved the story of your boss getting you hired and then quitting on your second day at TSR.
Well, and the funny thing about that is that I thought he was joking. Like, he came into my office. He came into my office like in the afternoon, and actually Jim Ward came in earlier that day. And Jim is just kind of a jokester, and so he walks up to me around 10 a.m. He's like, "Sean, just so you know, Rob has given us his notice, and today is actually going to be his last day. So you're going to be in charge of reporting directly to me." I was like, "Okay, sure, sounds good." And he says, "Do you have any questions about that?" And I said, "No, that sounds good, Jim. Thanks." It's like, "All right, well, I'll be in my office if you need me." And he walks away, and I realized he was not joking. And Rob spent the next several hours saying goodbye to all the people, all of his friends at TSR, and then finally came and told me, he's like, "Hey, by the way, I'm leaving. This is my last day." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Your boss told me 4 hours ago. What the hell, dude?" So that was kind of kooky. Another funny story about my old TSR job was several other people had applied for that job. One of them was Bruce Cordell, had originally applied to be
yes,
the TSR.
you beat him out for the job. I remember this.
Yeah, and I got the job and he didn't. And Bruce was like, "Wow, that really sucks. I wanted that online job because right now I'm working as a biochemist, synthesizing RNA. Wonder what other TSR jobs are there. Well, there's this game designer job. I guess I'll apply for that." So 3 months later, Bruce is hired. He's like, "I guess I'll settle for a game designer position on the D&D team." And now we have Bruce, who is awesome.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was one thing I wanted to ask. Considering your history, and if this is too personal, please just tell me to shut up. You had worked with Monty Cook on Malhavoc Press. I was surprised that you decided to do this on your own as Sean K. Reynolds Games, and that it wasn't like a Monty Cook Games production, considering how close you had been in the past. It was was there a particular reason you decided to make the game as standalone and not with another publisher?
Well, there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. For one, my wife Jody had gotten accepted into law school, so we were already kind of in the works of planning to move from Washington State out to Indiana. And while Monty is great about handling telecommuting, I mean, half the people at Mighty Good Games, they're in out of state. Like Charles and Tammy Ryan are in Kansas, I think, and so there's just that would not have been an obstacle to it. But I really had wanted to strike out on my own and do my own thing, and so that, coupled with the fact that Bruce knew that Monty was thinking about leaving Wizards of the Coast. Bruce and Monty have known each other since they were like 10 years old. So in terms of friendship with Monty, Bruce has a lot more seniority over me. So when Monty heard that, I'm sure that he talked to Bruce and was like, well, I've got, my own game company here, and we did really well with Numenera, so I could afford to take you on, as our designer. And Bruce, probably said, well, I've got this idea to, take your game and spin it in this another direction. Let's make a Kickstarter of that. And obviously they were radically successful with that as well. So it's a lot of things. So like Bruce had his eye on, gathering up, joining Monty Cook Games, and Monty wanted to really work with Bruce, and I think that actually was the first time that Bruce and Monty got to work together on an RPG product. Like, they've been friends all this time, and they worked in the game industry and at TSR and Wizards all this time, and they never worked on the project together. So that was really kind of a long overdue sort of thing. So I totally understand why that worked that way. And me just wanting to do my own thing and needing to move and do stuff on my own.
That was a bad example of using Monty specifically. My point was you had worked with other gaming companies to produce pet projects of your own before. It was just that you'd wanted to do this one as a standalone as Sean K. Reynolds Games rather than producing it through another publisher. I'm always interested in why people choose to be publishers and not necessarily just game designers. And in this case, it was...
Go ahead.
No, in this case, it was because you wanted to strike out on your own.
Yeah, I mean, you can go ahead and call me just a game designer all you want. That's, I see your subtle insult here, Steve. Man, I mean, I know I'm not like right publishing, and therefore I've got like an extra.
No. That was not what I meant by that. What I meant was that
in all fairness,
just bring up how Pluto's not a planet anymore. Why don't you do that too? Just like stab me some more one day.
I did not bring that up. You brought it up first. I brought up nothing.
So in all fairness, right, Sean has published books before, some of which I've written for, right? He did Swords into Plowshares, which I thought was a wonderful project. I was very proud to have done some web content for that. And he had a really awesome book that had mimics in it, including like a suit of mimic aboleth land armor. So I think Sean gets to be in the publisher club, right? Even before this, he qualified.
I wasn't saying in the publisher club. I'm saying why I was trying to get his words of wisdom to pass on to those who follow us who want to be publishers.
Oh, words of wisdom. Hey, Sean, how about some words of wisdom on why you decided you wanted to be your own publisher for this project?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak my mind. I mean, if you go to my website, the tagline of it is, Sean K. Reynolds, very opinionated D20 gaming. I am kind of a loudmouth, and I'm not afraid to say, what I feel, even if it ruffles a few feathers. And this is a unique opportunity for me. I just left Paizo, and I could immediately start, working for somebody else or writing for somebody else. But given that my wife is getting ready to go to law school, and we're changing states that we live in, and it's just this is kind of an opportunity for me to reset what I'm doing and reset my perspective on a lot of things. When I moved to Washington to start working for Paizo, that was also a big reset in my life. I had just gotten out of a 10-year-long relationship. I had left the company that I'd been working for and was going back to tabletop RPGs. I was going back to Washington State, and so it was a good opportunity to just kind of take a breather and go, all right, starting a new chapter in my life. And this is really me just kind of putting my pedal to the metal and saying, all right, I'm going to go and just write the stuff that I want to write, and let's see if there's enough interest in it for me to be able to support myself doing that. And I mean, this is just, in terms of timing, it's a unique opportunity. Like, Jodi's doing her thing, and I'm doing my thing, and where we're living is kind of in flux right now, and I can't really start working full time for somebody else. So I'm doing the Sean K. Reynolds games commitment to myself, and doing it full time instead of whenever I had opportunities in between other work that I was doing. I mean, I have a lot of books that I want to write. I had a list of books that I wanted to write when I started at Paizo, and I've written one of them. And I just had no time because Paizo, as you know, is incredibly busy. It's just incredibly demanding on your time.
I have no idea what you're talking about. I have 2 other jobs just so that I don't get bored.
Yeah. Yeah. How's RPG Superstar going? I hear you're going to be taking that over for me.
That's the rumor, yeah. That is the rumor. And so far, with nothing having had to be done yet, I don't see what the big deal is. It's taken almost none of my time so far. I've pitched things to people, all of which was received very well, and I'm really looking forward to it. Now, if you want a fair answer to that question, ask me in April.
Actually, a better time to ask you would be in December, which is right around when they realize, oh, we need to start steering this ship because we need to start this next week. And where are we now, Owen?
That ship is actually being steered, right? I've got a schedule. I'm going. I have more than once at Paizo, because I'm a new guy, because everyone knows my name and everyone there has worked with me, but I've never been on the inside. I've occasionally looked around and said, so this thing sneaks up on us every year, right? Right. Well, what if we start working on it now? And there'll be a 2-second silence, and then James Sutter will say, you're a witch! And then we start working on it. So, so far, I'm very pleased with how everything scheduling-wise seems to go at Paizo. That said, I may still be in a beautiful honeymoon period, but I'm having a good time at Paizo. I'm having a good time with Green Ronin. I'm having a good time running Rogue Genius. I'm very.
I don't know how he does it.
I'm very, very honored that Green Ronin and Paizo both looked at a situation where I'm going to work full time for one of them and as a contractor part time for the other, and they both said, "Okay, Owen, if you say you can do that, we trust you." That's a lot of trust, and I am moved by that. I appreciate it greatly. Mostly it is just a matter of letting people know what you're doing, right? Before I released Slayer Talents, which is a short little PDF, like Rogue Genius does, that gave new options for the Slayer class for the Advanced Class Guide. And I waited 30 days till the book was out before I started working on it at all, and I just went up to the people in charge and I said, hey, this is OGL material, it's been 30 days, I'm starting to have some ideas, is it okay if I do something with it in another company? Is that cool? Because I had advanced awareness of it, right? It's not fair for me to have a product ready to go when something first hits, because that means I have used Paizo time and Paizo resources for my own gain, and that's not what I'm there for. I'm at Paizo to do Paizo stuff.
Yes,
great. And it was in the open play test well before that.
Well, sure, but not the final version. Yeah, right? I saw the final version the day I walked in.
Yeah.
But in any case, everyone's reaction was, yeah, sure, that's fine. And it came out and sold very well for us so far. So, yeah, no. Paizo is a lot of work. I'm not saying otherwise. But as of yet, it's a lot of work in a perfectly reasonable size, scale, and volume.
Yeah. So where I was going with that is, I mean, I have a lot of books that I wanted to write, and just my commitments to Paizo kept me from doing almost all of that. And now that I am free to set my own schedule, I am sometimes going to sleep at 5 a.m. and waking up at 8 a.m. Just because the craziness of running a Kickstarter puts you in a situation where you wake up and you're like, oh, I have to write this other thing for today, and it's going to take me 4 hours, and I have this other thing that needs to be written tomorrow, and that's going to take 16 hours, and I don't have enough daylight, so I better get going. And then you crash out for an hour nap after you post a blog, and then you get back to work. It's crazy, but it's
all the
really
while you're responding to Kickstarter backers.
Yes, yeah. And prodding artists and lining up freelancers for other things, and it's a busy time.
Yep. It's fun to be the designer and the publisher.
It's a lot of hats. Fortunately, I have a big head, so I can put one hat on this side, and then the smaller, less important, just the designer hat over here. Maybe just like on the here.
I have threatened to actually go to a convention with 3 hats, each with a different game company name in front, so people know who I'm talking as. So I saw that you did the Goody White Kickstarter first. Was that in any way a dry run to see what the process would feel like before you did the 5 Moons Kickstarter?
It definitely was. I mean, Goody White is something I had been thinking about doing for about 6 to 8 months, so it was just the perfect opportunity to say, okay, this is going to be a small book. I'm just going to learn how Kickstarter works from the inside, because I had backed a lot of projects when I started that, but it's very different to run your own Kickstarter.
Oh, yes.
And just learning the ins and outs of the parts of the text that you can change after the launch and the parts that you can't, and how that makes it easy to do certain kinds of updates or add certain rewards, and how it makes it impossible to add other kinds. So it's just like, okay, having learned that, now I can know how to structure this bigger one that is going to be more than just a 3-month time commitment of my design time.
Or even the fact that you can't even update the main page of Kickstarter once your Kickstarter ends.
Yes.
You can't say, here's the link to the finished product, please go buy it. You can't put that on the front page of your Kickstarter, which is the most ridiculous thing ever. But that's because, yes, I can do updates, but I do updates all the time because we had rewards that were continuing to roll around that come out after you finished the core product. And you don't have that front page link for the core product. That's one minor thing about Kickstarter that really still bugs me after all this time.
Well, and I have not yet done my own Kickstarter, right? I've been involved at various levels with other people's, including Mike Myler's Kickstarter, which he managed to round up $9,000 for a PDF, which is impressive as hell from my point of view. But I will probably, when I do, have one of the very first thing I do be, hey, for the latest news, go look at, and I'll have a link on there that will be to a website, and then that website will have a link to buy the product when the product's out. Just so,
Good.
I mean, the update system's great, but the fact that it dies on the front page, and people may not ever think to look at update 147, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And part of that is that they're still at Kickstarter are still learning better ways that they can make their product useful to the campaign creators. Like the whole idea of, you know what, it would be really nice if there was an option to have a checkbox whether or not something was available internationally, and if you're going to have an additional fee for international shipping. That's fairly, and that's huge.
Yeah, it's
because, shipping something from Indiana to New York might be $6, but shipping it to Germany might be $25. And if some guy pledged at the $25 level, it's like, oh, that ate all my money that you just gave me. Thanks.
Yeah, that's really that's one of the nice things that I found with some of our Kickstarters, where it actually becomes cheaper to print it via Lightning Source because it prints in the UK and is cheaper to ship in Europe than it is to take something out of the warehouse sometimes and ship it all the way to Europe.
Yeah.
I found an interesting thing with Lightning Source that if it's a Canadian customer, they will ship from the UK rather than shipping from the US because there's a 12% customs fee paid. And the shipper controls that. You don't control that. So if you ship it UPS from here to Canada, they won't give it to your customer until that customer pays them the 12% customs charge.
Yep.
But if you ship it United States Postal Service, it doesn't seem to have that problem.
Yeah.
Just little things like this that you learn very, very quickly playing around with Kickstarter when you're doing a lot more international customers in that fashion.
So, to get back to 5 Moons itself, Sean.
Yes, sorry.
What? No, this is a very casual show, right? And say whatever the heck you want. You're going to anyway, so we give you permission. But because we're sort of trying to boost this thing, what would you say are signs that someone will like this game, right? If someone's already playing 5th edition, or they're playing Pathfinder, or they're playing 2nd edition D&D, or God forbid they're just the biggest fans of the EverQuest tabletop role-playing game, right? Whatever it is. What might be issues they are having with those games that if you heard them say that, you'd say, well,
Well, most of my experience is obviously with publishings from TSR, Wizards of the Coast, and Paizo, and so I'm looking at it mostly from a D&D perspective. I'm not really trying to recruit the EverQuest player, or EverQuest, or Everway or World of Darkness or anything like that. But if you're playing some iteration of D&D or Pathfinder, and you realize that you're spending more time rolling up a character than you are playing the character, you might want to take a look at my game. If you are looking for a core book that reads like a game or almost like a conversation between a couple of gamers instead of an encyclopedia or a reference book, you might want to take a look at my game. I have a background in teacher education, and I applied that knowledge to the Pathfinder beginner box, which is why that's why it reads the way it does. It speaks right to the reader. It says, okay, you're a fighter, this is what you do. You can do this, you can select feats, you can select skills. Whereas the core rulebook uses the D&D third-person terminology where it says, a fighter can do this, a fighter selects this many skills. And in my experience and from my training, when you're trying to engage a person and teach them, it's more effective to speak to them like you're talking to them as a person. So Five Moon says, you can select this many feats, you can select skills this way, you can pick your gear. It talks about you, as if you're a real person, and that's unified through the entire book. D&D and Pathfinder are kind of split on how they do stuff. Like, spells are written saying, when you cast this spell, you do this. And feats say, when you use this feat, you do this. But classes are written as the fighter, the cleric, and so on. Magic items say, the wearer, and the monster said, this monster does that. Whereas I just want to focus it on talking to you. And like a monster write-up will talk to the GM as if the GM is playing the monster. It's like, you can do this. You can throw a rock up to 180 feet. You can re-roll your will save if you spend a boost. I mean, that sort of thing. It's just having dealt with the FAQ system for Pathfinder for the past 5 years and the weird little corner cases that people develop when you get book A plus book B plus book Z, and having so many, and part of this is just that Paizo and Wizards of the Coast have had so many authors over the years writing rules content, and the developers and the editors have not been the same people over all that time, and so the language has kind of shifted over time. And so it's like trying to read a modern translation of Beowulf and looking at like an Old English translation of Beowulf and trying to suss out, what the intent of a particular phrase was, because this author said if, and this other author says may, and it's just like, what does this person mean? It's so convoluted. Like I used to tell the Paizo staff all the time, people would come to me with a rules question, and I would reply with, how I think the rules should work based on a particular interpretation of other parts of the rule system, and then I would say, the game is toocomplex.com, because it's a really complex system.
That is going to become a meme very soon.
Well, it is. It is. It's a complex game. The core rulebook for Pathfinder, which combines the Player's Handbook and the DMG, is a 550, 60-page book. That's a lot of material to read just to play your game. And when we were working on the beginner box, part of the work was to chop off everything past level 5, but part of it was to cut out stuff like attacks opportunities. Like, don't worry about that. But a lot of it was, hey, what's the essential part of this game that we want people to focus on? And that is sitting down with your friends, playing a character, and fighting monsters, and exploring dungeons and things like that. And changing the way that you write the game to engage the reader to think in a certain way, think about the fun of that, is really, really important. And it's interesting to look at like basic D&D versus advanced D&D, because the editors of the basic set were very much trying to present technical information, but it was much more light-hearted sort of presentation. It wasn't jokesy, but it was just simpler. And then AD&D comes along, and Gary Gygax just had this huge vocabulary of all these obscure words from pulp and all these things, and he really like to show off that. And I mean, he's credited with creating a lot of words that are pretty common among gamers and among the English language now. There's an article talking about how he like kind of revived the word dweomer. And there's just, you know, he decided to do that. And that's great, but when you're talking about a rule book, that's something you like, okay, do I need to have a dictionary on hand to look up what this word is when I'm trying to play this game? And so I'm just trying to get back to the old sort of, you know, here you are, here's your fighter, here's your cleric, here's your magic user, here's your rogue. You're going to run around, you're going to fight stuff in the dungeon, and it's going to hit you, and you're going to hit it back, and it's going to be a lot of fun, and you're going to, you know, like eat Fritos, and you're going to drink Mountain Dew, and you're going to have a great time. And you don't need to treat it as if it were a college lecture to have that sort of fun. Because for a lot of people, for most people, it's a game that they just sit down with their friends once a month, their old gaming buddies, or, you know, their college buddies, or even just their kids, and they play the game and they have fun. And that's what I want to get back to.
Interesting. So one of the things that we talked about the other day, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Owen about this, is there was some discussion about how people learn to play tabletop role-playing games, and that in the modern age, the most often way anybody learns to play any role-playing game is your friend introduces it to you. In your example, your cousin introduced you to the game, and he was the one who taught you how to play. You didn't necessarily just pick up the rule book and start reading it, and that's how you learned originally to play. Even I, you know, my very first game was sitting down at a convention with Stephen Shend and him running, you know, Marvel Superheroes role-playing, so that I, you know, the Fossarip system, and I could learn, and that's how I learned to play. It wasn't, you know, and learning to play D&D, I didn't, even then after that, it wasn't, my first exposure to it was going to sitting down, being handed a character sheet, and learning how to play through actual play. And the idea being that that was limiting in the number of people that you could bring into the industry is based on the number of people who are active and recruiting for their games.
This is apparently yet again an area where I have a very aberrant background in history.
Yes, because you were the exception to the rule.
Because I did learn to play by reading the first edition advanced D&D Dungeon Master's Guide, and we did not even have a player's handbook.
Wow.
And after reading the Dungeon Master's Guide, I determined what information we needed for characters and made it up. And that was how we played it first.
Well, then officially that means you were not playing Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, Owen, because unless you're playing exactly by the rule books, you're not playing official D&D. Shame on you.
I'm aware of that, but I think the principle of first sale applies, right? Once I've bought that book, I get to do whatever I want with it, and so Gary Gygax may not have felt I was playing official AD&D, but I was playing a game, and I was using AD&D.
Next Gen Con, I'm going to show up with a tattoo pen, and I and the ghost of Gary Gygax are going to tattoo a teardrop with a D20 in it under your eye, just to show that you belong in D&D jail.
I would totally take a teardrop with a D20 under my eye for Gen Con. I may not have to do that. I may have it on me already by the time I show up.
Now, let me ask you something. Are you also the sort of person that when you buy a new video game, you sit down, you read the manual front to back, and then you try and play it, or do you actually just start up the game and start playing?
That entirely depends on the game. If it's a game style that I have not played before, yes, I read the manual. If it's Mario, I have played so much freaking Mario. And it's a skill that my wife and I call Mario Foo. That we will slap the game in, and we're like, okay, so this is a jump, and this is a long jump, and that's a stomp, and oh, hey, he's got a water jetpack, and there's a little tutorial. Yes. And tutorials have made that much, much easier, right? There were not really tutorials for most of the games I played when I started playing them. You know, you put in Super Mario World, if you don't jump on the first turtle kills you, and that's how you learn not to let turtles touch you. But I do have a real love of how the rule system works above and beyond the game it creates. And I know that makes me aberrant. I'm well aware of that.
The other one that I'm
game designer.
You are, yeah. I mean, that's the other thing is that you're a game designer, so you are the alpha gamer to begin with. And even the steps above the alpha gamers is because, you know, both of you are deep industry contacts. I mean, you know people literally that you can pick up the phone and, you know, get their opinion if you absolutely needed it.
Well, I could drop them a line on Facebook. It's amazing how many people in this industry will not answer the phone if they can possibly help it.
I don't like talking on the phone at all, yeah. Like, my voicemail on my phone says hang up and text me. I mean, I just don't want to talk on the phone with people.
So Sean can probably confirm this, right? No one calls anyone at Paizo, right? Most people have phones on their desks, but no one uses them. And when I had a real issue as a freelancer, I would call, and Cosmo would answer, and I'd be like, "Hi, it's Owen Stevens." He'd be like, "Oh, yeah, I know who you are." And he's got this tone in his voice like, "Why are you talking to me?" And I'm like, "So I've got this thing with Sean, and I really want to ask him a question, and my deadline's coming up." He'd be like, "Oh, okay." And he'd put me through, and Sean would be like, "Hello? Hi, Sean, it's Owen. I just wanted to ask you this question." He's like, "I have email." I said, "Well, yeah, but I never know how long it's going to take. I just want a quick question." And he'd answer, right? Sean's totally professional. Like my second or third day there, Wes Schneider joked that he hired me so I'd stop calling him.
That's well, I mean, let me give you a similar story.
That's awesome.
Paizo was in that office. I was in that office for about 3 years, 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
And the entire time, my phone's voicemail light has been blinking because I don't know how to access that phone's voicemail. Because people don't call me on that phone. Like, occasionally, like, Cosmo or customer service will call me on the phone. I'll be like, "Hello." It's like, "Yes, we have a customer on the line for you." I'm like, "What?" And it's like, "Oh, you want somebody else?" And I have to go and, like, text someone, a customer service, and say, "How do I transfer someone on the phone?" Because they only have to do that, like, once a year. So it's like, beep, 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 and usually I just end up hanging up on them. But I just don't know how to use the phone because I don't use the office phone for anything.
My desk did not have an office phone my first day, and I did not own a cell phone when I got out here, right? LJ owned a cell phone, and I worked from home. So I had a landline on my desk, and I was at my desk 120 hours a week. I didn't need a cell phone. I wasn't ever anywhere. So I needed a phone to be able to call my wife the first couple of weeks to tell her, "Hey, come get me," or "We're going out to lunch," or whatever. So I was like, I don't have a phone. And the IT people are just staring at me, and they're like, "Well, we didn't think you'd want one." And there's a race of the other people in the developer pit on who can give me their phone first.
Yeah.
Right? They are tearing their phones out of the walls so that they can give him my phone. He can have my phone. It's fine. Give him my phone.
Well, when they hired Stephen, Stephen Randy McFarlane, they put him in the developer pit because they didn't have in my office, but the goal was to move him into the closed door office that I was going to be sharing with him. And for at least a month, we only had one phone for that office. We were fine with that because we didn't care. We're like, whatever. We both have cell phones. We don't need this landline that is just loud and stupid, and the red light is still flashing after all this time. You had mentioned, Steve, about just picking up the phone and calling somebody else in the industry, and that actually relates to the earlier topic for me of learning the game from somebody who teaches it to you. And I had two comments about that. One is that the tutorial for a video game actually is the equivalent of a knowledgeable GM sitting you down and teaching you how to play. And that's the great thing about video games, is they can just have a built-in GM to show you the ropes. John Tweet, sorry.
Yes.
I'm getting my Jonathans mixed up. John Wick wrote L5R. He runs a really good game. He's a very creative guy. And I remember when he tells me the story that when they were working on that game, they were trying to find a way to really get people to understand the experience of playing L5R. And they said, "John, all we need to do is just put a copy of you in every box to explain and run the game for them, and they will totally get it." But they don't have that option, so they have to go and come up with a text version of showing people how to play the game. The other part of my story is about Jonathan Tweet, and you're talking about calling people up, and the idea of teaching someone how to play the game relates to one of the first books I was writing as a full-time designer at Wizards of the Coast. I wrote the very first adventure for the revived Greyhawk in 1990.
The Scarlet Brotherhood.
No, it was the Starcairns.
Okay.
It was a trilogy, and the first one was Starcairns. And Jonathan was the developer on that. They said, we need to have an experienced designer take a look at this first solo project that Sean's writing. So we did that. And in my adventure, there is a secret door. And Jonathan read the adventure, and he comes to me and he's like, "Sean, what does an elf need to roll to detect a secret door in second edition AD&D? And I said, well, I need to roll a 1 on a d6. He says, all right, what does a human need to roll to detect a secret door? And I said, well, they need to roll a 2 on a d6. And he says, can you show me in the rule book where that is stated? And I'm like, well, hold on. I flipped through the rules for secret doors, and I couldn't find it. I'm flipping through the player's handbook for the elf section and the human section, and I couldn't find it. And we had just gotten the CD-ROM of like all the Dragon magazines and the core rule books, you know, in digital files. I'm doing a search for secret door and elf, blah, blah, blah. Couldn't find it. The second edition player's handbook tells you that elves have an easier time of detecting secret doors than humans do because elves have keen senses. Elves can detect a secret door by rolling a 1 on a d6. Nowhere does the book tell you that other races have to roll a 1 or a 2 on a d6. But everybody I know who's ever played second edition AD&D knows that non-elves have to roll a 1 or a 2, and that's because they've all played first edition, which does tell you.
Exactly.
Or they learned how to play D&D from someone who played first edition, and when that question came up, they're like, well, let's roll a 1 or a 2. So there's this critical piece of information that is missing from the second edition AD&D Player's Handbook that everybody knows just because they all learned from people who already know that information. So it's just this propagation of critical news that isn't in the book.
It's a big thing that happened to us when we were doing. We took the Amber Dice role-playing game, we took its system, and we created a new game called Lords of Gosford and Shadow. 50% of my customers are Amber Dice role-playing customers who've never learned by reading the book. They learned by playing. So when we rewrote the rules and they actually had to sit down and read the rules, we were getting accused of changing things that we never changed because they were exactly as written in the original rule book. But because they had learned from house ruled, you know, this game's 20 years old at this point. It's been so entirely house ruled that we literally came to the opinion that we needed to write the rules as written and really pay attention to that because nobody did except the publisher.
Yep.
You know, because there was no there, and we were in a different situation to where, like say Pathfinder, where you have, as we were talking about, you start getting a decade's worth of history, and you know, once a year you get a 300-page book that is a new set of rules. Where I was dealing with a system that had 2 books in 20 years, but yet all these people were still playing it, and it was an interesting difference from being somebody who was publishing, you know, tremendous amount of third-party material to being a first-party publisher and having to deal with the idea, well, how many splat books are we going to make, and how many, you know, adventures are we going to do versus this? That was a lot of new decision ground for me to make. So I found it really interesting to listen about what your approach was going to be for Five Moons on deciding where, at what point do you stop with the rule system? At what point is there enough rules to do what you want to do and to reach the type of system you want to create? I also find it interesting when we're talking about, this is another thing that came up in this same discussion that I was having. This is with the author of Lords of Gossamer Shadow, a guy named Jason Durrell. He does a lot of indie games, like he did the deluxe basic role-playing game for Chaosium and stuff like that. But he made a good point the other day about modern design. We were talking about the fact that we're trying to sell our books to, and a lot of us were doing, you know, full-color hardbacks, you know, 300 pages, to a generation that reads their book on their phone. You know, or as I was trying to explain this the other day, my gaming group, I was the only person who was buying physical books anymore when I lived in Ohio. You know, I was the only, you know, and I bought a lot, and I had moved away and bought a lot of electronic books. But the other 6 people who played in my Pathfinder role-playing game used nothing but the PathfinderSRD.com. And that was the way, because they sat there and they played with their tablets and they played with their. Now I admit most of my friends are high-end tech guys, and that's what they like to play with, is their, you know, their laptops and so forth, sitting at their desk, and they love the SRD because it's searchable, and they love it because it's quick link, hyperlinked, and they can go all over the place to find stuff very quickly. But it was interesting in that none of them actually owned a book, and that I was the only one who did.
We're living in the future.
And that was. Yeah, well, yeah, you're living in the future, but it was an interesting thing to where it started making me think about, you know, I need to be more conscious about getting our rules online and as you were talking about, one of your big early things was just getting TSR to create a website, and getting us to step away from always doing PDFs and learning the layout of how to make effective ebooks, from .mobi to EPUB. So it's that kind of, and your idea that there was a mentality, an engineer's mentality versus, hey, I'm a modern web guy. And that's something that we haven't overcome in our industry yet.
That will conclude our Inside Baseball segment on...
Sorry.
No, it's good. Sean, is there anything else that you would want to take this opportunity for our dozens of two viewers to make sure that there is a thing you want to make sure you say about Five Moons? And we'll have a link to it below when we post up the actual video broadcast. But is there any last words you want to make sure get out that we haven't given you a leading question to answer yet?
Sure. I want people to know that the game is not fully designed yet. I mean, I have a lot of high-end concepts and a lot of little chunks that are fitting together, but the actual design will be taking place over the next 3 or 4 months, for the playtest to follow in January and February. So there's still time to be involved in the process and give feedback about what you think would be good for the game. So the Kickstarter is running until October 28th. I've been making a lot of posts about those high-end concepts and other weird little bits on the Five Moons RPG blog, which is a WordPress blog. You'll have the link for it. And I'm really good about answering people's questions and replies to the blog posts or to the Kickstarter updates or to the Facebook group. It's just I have a lot of experience in wrangling a lot of conversations at once, and I want to hear what people have to say. And I like hearing from people who are excited about the game, and even people who don't think the game is for them. I have had a couple people write me and say, well, if I have D&D 5th edition and I have 13th Age, why would I want to play your game if they're giving me what I want? And I tell them, well, I can't make my game appeal to everybody, so enjoy the games that you're enjoying. But if there is something cool that you would like to see in this game, and if I think you would fit, then I'm all in favor of plugging it in. I mean, it's like I'm making this game because this is the game that I want to play. And so I'm really enthusiastic about it. And if somebody comes up with a really cool idea that gets me excited about it, it's going to go in the game. And there's actually there's a backer level for my Kickstarter called the Inner Circle, where you get some one-on-one time via a video chat like this one, just to talk about your ideas for the game, and just an extensive. Basically, it's kind of like a pitch room sort of thing. And if someone comes up with some really awesome idea, and I think they have the creative spark, I will say, look, let me just give you a contract, and you can go ahead and write that for the game as a book, because that's a really great idea. But just keep an eye on the blog and the Kickstarter and the 17 other ways of staying abreast of the campaign, whether that's Twitter or Facebook or whatever, Instagram even, and just keep an eye out.
And if any of you are wondering why you'd want one-on-one time with Sean K. Reynolds, and I gave him no warning I was going to out him on this. Lewis Porter Jr., who's a third-party publisher, right, and has been doing products for quite a while, paid for one-on-one time with Sean for game design, and Sean ripped him a new one, and that's Lewis's description of what happened, right? And Lewis is thrilled. Lewis is thrilled silly that Sean said, here are all the things that are wrong with this, and this is why they're wrong, and this is how they get better. So, and Sean is someone that other publishers are paying for him to look at their time. And certainly if I thought there was anyone who had enough design acumen that I am interested in what game they want to play, Sean is absolutely on that list. So I heartily recommend, if you have any interest, not even necessarily in having another D20 style game, right? But if you're interested in watching the process of watching one get built, at the very least, listen to his blogs. He has interesting things to say. I frequently disagree with him, and I don't pull any punches either because he can take it.
Yep.
He and I agree on a huge number of things on what is and isn't important and what does or does cause problems. But I only respond because I value his opinion and I read the whole thing, right?
Yeah, even
I always feel I am wiser for having read what Sean has to say on a given subject.
Yeah, and to for many of the people who know some of our works as the Right Publishing people, there are many things that Sean has written that have been OGL that we have shamelessly looted and put in Right Publishing books because we liked them so much. Some of the stuff that I did with the idea of wild magic, we looted from some of Sean's early ideas about wild magic that he posted up on his blogs and some of the spells that we ended up using in 1001 Spells when I was looking for new spells ideas came from, is it Skyer? I always mispronounce the first part of the registry that you did with the NPCs.
I think it's Screen. I mean, it's the first half of it. It's actually my old college email address. It's S from Sean, K from middle initial, and then REYN. So Screen, whatever.
Screen's registry had a really interesting concept on its ideas, but one of the things that was nice is there was always a new piece of game material with each NPC, and there was a number of interesting spells that I found in there that I took inspiration from, and some just copied straight and put the OGL content in there. And
as a teaching moment, folks, don't use a fantasy name without having any idea. Someone will ask you, is it Suwagan, what the hell? So you just have some clue. I'm sorry, I interrupted you, Sean.
Oh, I was going to say that actually some of those spells got picked up and put in Paizo products too, like in the core line. There was actually a spell that, wow, which one was it? It was called You Will Awaken on Fire. And it's basically a spell that you cast on somebody, and then the next time they fall asleep, the spell triggers, and when they wake up, they just catch on fire and burn to death. And that was going to end up in Ultimate Magic, but with the spell chapters running a little long, and the editors were like, "This is the first spell that we have that's actually the title is a sentence. We're not sure we want to have this in the game." So
what is?
Because it's why we ended up cutting it just from the list, and I love the editors. I'm just making fun of them. They actually don't sound like that. It ended up in another book, and it was eventually called Awaken on Fire. But yeah, it's fun, and people still ask me about the screen.
I think we took inspiration from that one, and there was a running gag in one of our games where somebody was betting whether somebody was going to come out of an encounter with a dragon as a flying flaming corpse, and they started making bets, and eventually I just made a spell called Flying Flaming Corpse spell, which you throw flying, you kill somebody, you set them on fire, and you throw their body at your enemy.
Nice.
So, but yes, that's kind of the stuff where you can get deep inspiration from what Sean's done, and I recommend anybody backing. I'm a backer on the Goodly White Kickstarter. I haven't had even a chance to look at Five Moons yet because I waited for this opportunity to sit and listen to Sean and talk about his game so that I could get excited about it and back it next. So
there is one other thing that I wanted to mention. So I worked at Paizo for 6 years, and I worked at Wizards of the Coast before that. And one of the sad things for me is that because of the OGL, and everybody's using the OGL, Wizards didn't put all the proper names to the spells. So now it's not Mordenkainen's Disjunction. It's just Disjunction.
It's now Mage's Disjunction. Yeah.
Exactly. So I kind of miss having all those names. So for Five Moons RPG, there is actually a backer level called Named Core. And there's one called Name Player, whether you get the core book or the player's book. But you get to name one of the spells, stunts, or combat, actions like power attack. You get to name it after your character or you. So you could be the next Draw Mage or Big B or whatever in the Five Moons RPG. So everybody who plays that new game is going to be calling like, I cast, Fergark's Deathly Fireface, and that's you. And so when you go to Gen Con, you'd be like, yeah, that's me. That's my character.
Yeah, that was one of the interesting carryovers from the Dying Earth series. I think is where that where that comes from. And then it was something that had to be lost when it went to the OGL, and nobody ever was able to have enough clout to make new names stick. I'd seen a couple of publishers try it, but nobody really had the clout to make those kind of things stick.
When they were working on the OGL, I suggested they actually put fake placeholder names in the OGL for that purpose. So instead of Melf's Acid Arrow, the OGL would be Mel's Acid Arrow. Instead of, Odaluk's Freezing Spear, Odal's Freezing Spear. So people would at least know that, I'm looking for a spell and it starts with O, and they would find it in the same place in the alphabet. But they decided not to do that. And So here we are now. But that was the opportunity to bring back the crazy names. And if you've ever played, there's a game called Epic Spells War or Epic Spell Wars.
Epic Spell Wars.
Yeah, there you go. And it's kind of similar in that it's got like a very much an Errol Otis sort of illustration vibe of all these weird wizards, and you're like, I have a wizard, and I cast this. You're building all these spells, and it's just all named craziness and very old school. It's delicious.
That's something we didn't. Yeah, that's something we really didn't talk about was the art style that you had chosen for Five Moons.
Yep, and we don't have time.
Okay. The next time we have Sean K. Reynolds come on, we will talk about art. From hearing Owen tell me we don't have time, I'm going to guess that this is the segment I'm supposed to reach called "Pimp Your Product," where we talk about something other than the Kickstarter that we were currently talking about. So let's start with Sean. Sean, do you have a product for sale through Sean K. Reynolds Games, or another product that you're excited about that you would want to pimp and let people know about that they could check out so they can get samples of your work, for example?
Well, most of my solo stuff has kind of been on hold while I've been working on Goody White and Five Moons, so none of that is available for anybody who's not involved in the Kickstarter to buy. But I hear that the Monster Codex from Paizo is now rolling out to subscribers, and
if my camera was working, I'd show you my copy.
There you go, good. And I was a developer on that. Actually, I was a developer after I left Paizo. That was one of the things that I did when I left Paizo, is I told them, look, guys, I don't want to leave you in the lurch without their designer, so if you want to contract some developer work out for me on Monster Codex just so you don't fall behind until you hire somebody, do it. And so I developed a couple of pieces of that.
Nice.
So take a look at Monster Codex. Obviously, I had a really big role in the Advanced Class Guide. I wrote the Brawler, the Slayer, the Skald, and the Hunter class, which are all getting a lot of good reviews. So check out those two things.
Okay. Owen, do you have a product that you would like to pimp this week?
Yep, I'm going to do a couple, and I'm going to keep them all really, really, really short. I wrote for Monster Codex, so I also want people to go take a look for it. I also wrote for the Advanced Class Origins book, which basically takes the Advanced classes and tells you where they are in Galarian and why you think you haven't seen them before. Those are both coming out, and I like the work on both of those. For Rogue Genius, which is where that's the sound of me switching hats, we just put out an adventure called There's Your Problem, which is a short, easy-to-run adventure for first, second, or third level characters. I think we officially say second, but you could survive with first just fine. Which is the only adventure I'm aware of that is based on a freelancer pitch that came in while I was complaining that my air conditioner was broken. And that served as the inspiration for There's Your Problem by Curtis Baum, and he did a great job. It's a fun little adventure. And then last week we had Michael Sayre's first professional product, which was the Genius Guide to Bravery Feats, which he had one of the best pitches I've gotten as a publisher, which was the thing that really sets fighters apart from everything else. The one thing fighters have that no one else has at this point is bravery, right? Because the mages can pick up fighter feats, so you can't even say fighter feats. Everything else someone can get. But the fighter has bravery, so bravery should be used to do something more than just have a bonus. And so it's a series of fates that are designed that if you're playing a fighter and you want the fact that you are fearless to be a crucial part of your character and let you do more stuff. He did a great job putting that together, and we're very pleased with it. And that's available, all the links will be down below. So that's us, trying to keep it short. Steve, I will tell you now, Steve, I'm starting a stopwatch.
Okay. So I have Sean on here, so I'm going to talk about In the Company of Dragons because of his background with Savage Species. So one of the things that Wright Publishing is known for doing is our In the Company of Monsters series, where we turn monsters into player classes and try to balance them with the existing classes of the core book, so that you can play a giant, you can play a gargoyle, you can play a minotaur, and in this case, you can play a dragon, and it still be balanced. Not a half dragon, not a draconic sorcerer, not a dragon rider, not a dracomancer like some people would create, but
which are much cooler, and those classes are available too.
And to actually play a dragon, and that was written by Wendell Roy, who's just done an amazing job, and it's been a crazy bestseller for us. And I've been extremely, extremely pleased with it, and we've already commissioned the second book in that series, which will be the setting, where if you want to just play an entire party of dragons and where you can go and adventure and go so forth. So that'll be called In the Company of Dragons, The Lost Isles.
AKA Council of Worms from my publisher.
That was kind the original idea when I pitched it is I did not want to do Council of Worms, because when I played Council of Worms, my problem was just that you couldn't play dragons alongside other player characters. You can only play in the setting. But then we had a bunch of people ask us, could you do the whole Council of Worms kind of idea? And I said, yes, we could do something similar, but I still wanted to keep it so that even player characters, if you play Dwarven Fighters and that's all you play, you could still end up in the Council of Worms style setting and play your dwarf alongside the dragon, or play a dragon rider, or play a Dracomancer if you really must. So that's kind of the idea there. And that's kind of and to go back, one of my early inspirations for doing this was Sean's work on Savage Species, and us just having a different approach on that. Since that, we've also released Lords of Gossamer and Shadow Addendum, which is a new power that we released. It's just one new power that we've added to it. It's a very small piece called Empathy, which Jason Durall wrote, and is actually something from the old Amber game that just got cut from a manuscript, and Jason still owned it, so he was able to adapt it for Lords of Gossamer and Shadow. It was in the never published Rembra books, but it's really neat and really deals with the idea of telepathy in a setting like Lords of Gossamer and Shadow and prescience and stuff like that you see in some of the Dune books. And it's got some really, really great art by a new guy that we discovered. His name is Johnny Morrow. I always want to call him Johnny Mr. Tomorrow, but Johnny Morrow, he does an amazing artwork on there, and I'm really, really pleased with it. We did a new piece for Dungeon World for the Barbarian. The big thing for me there was getting to use the picture of the recently passed Joshua Gillian as the cover for our Barbarian book. That was just something for me, but that's been done by a guy that even his name's Alex Putman, and he's done some really great work with Dungeon World for us, and done campaigns for adventures for us and Adventure Quarterly. A new free pathways, 43 free issues now for you to go out and get. This is of course, it has another template designed by me. This one is the talking earlier about the advanced bestiary, how I'm big on undead being templates. This is a template for a monster that was found in the Tome of Horrors, which is the crucifixion spirit. So I decided to create a template that you can turn any creature that can be crucified into a crucifixion spirit, to add some more craziness to that. And probably the thing I am most proud of is my editor on 1001 Spells has written his first product, 101 Swamp Spells. To say he has some experience with spells would be, a minor thing, but he came and pitched me the idea of spells that did things cooler in a setting they were designed for. In this case, a terrain like swamps. They still work in any other type of setting, but they work really, really well in the specific type of terrain. And I've been really pleased with its reception, and I really like the artwork that we've put together for this. It's got an amazing cover by a French artist that we really love, and just really, really neat. So is my timer up, Owen, now?
You are at 5 minutes right now.
Okay. So I really tried to keep that short, but that's probably the thing I'm most proud of right now. In the Company of Dragons is selling gangbusters for us. Anything we do for Lords of Gossamer Shadow is extremely well received, and I was really proud to bring something that didn't get to appear in Amber out. And it really fits well for the Amber because it's just a piece of game mechanics. There's no setting material with this. So it works seamlessly with either game, and that's something I really love about being able to do. But how cool I thought that was David who came and pitched me this, and I was like, he's been my editor since we started Right Publishing, and sometime before that because he worked on the Knowledge Arcana stuff fanzine that was done through the forums at Wizards of the Coast, and editing for Penny Williams, and he was just somebody that I ran across. So he's been my editor on almost every piece of the 101 series, and was just a really great guy to work with, and I was really, really happy that he decided to take a stab at writing, and I've been really pleased with, because I got to look through and edit him a bit on because he pitched me the first 10 spells, and I said, let's rework some of these, and then they gave me a great place. Am I done?
You're done.
I'm done. Okay. Okay, so I want to thank Sean K. Reynolds for joining us here today on the Demiplane Gaming to talk about his new Kickstarter, 5 Moons RPG. Thank you so much, Sean.
Thanks, guys.
I want to thank my co-host, as always, Owen Casey Stevens.
Thank you, folks.
And I am, of course, your host, Stephen D. Russell. Bye, folks. Have a very good day.